Welcome back to another edition of Focus on Arts. I'm your host, Patrick Van Slyke, and I'm glad you can join us. Today we have a very special guest, a very good friend of mine and one of the most intelligent men I've ever met, Eric Westrope. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Patrick. The fact that you think I'm intelligent, I don't know how much that says about you, but...
Well, I think that...
Depends on who you ask.
I think that...
I've been called worse things.
I think that some of the schools that you've gone to might disagree with you. You have, after all, 3 degrees. Isn't that correct?
I have some degrees, which, you know, I was kind of a late bloomer. I didn't do very well in high school. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I have some degrees, which is kind of peripheral. I don't think people care that much about that, but well, hopefully the content will be
but I have a question that I've wanted to know, and one of your degrees is in theology.
I have a degree in theology. It's a master's in divinity.
Okay.
I have a master's in divinity, which is a theological degree.
Okay.
From Fuller Theological Seminary.
Okay.
I have a master's in philosophy in English.
Okay.
From Claremont Graduate University. Yeah.
How does somebody? What brought you to the point where you wanted to study theology? Mm-hmm. That's always been a question I've been meaning to ask you. I mean, what brings a person to that point?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because initially I think it's that kind of search for greater meaning, mm-hmm. you know, and really kind of a search for that a lot of people are interested in, that search for oneself.
Sure. That
journey to kind of find meaning in life, which is kind of ironic because the class I facilitate, which I know you wanted to talk about a little bit, Embracing Ritual, mm-hmm. Challenges that idea somewhat.
Oh, I see.
The importance of kind of finding oneself as opposed to finding significance and meaning outside yourself.
Okay.
In something perhaps greater than yourself or other than yourself.
I see.
Whether that be community, or if you want to call it God, mm-hmm. or you want to call it the solidarity of, mm-hmm. of what we find in common with other people.
I see. So did you, was it interesting? Did you enjoy it the time that you spent?
I hated it the first 2 years.
Really?
I absolutely hated it. And part of the other reason I did it was because when I got finished with college, mm-hmm. my bachelor's, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Okay.
But there were some people in my life, some significant people that I had a deep respect for, that had gone that route.
Oh.
And I didn't want to be stagnant.
Sure.
So I moved forward. It seemed like the logical thing to do at the time. First 2 years, I was miserable.
Oh my
It's
God.
a long program. A Master's of Divinity mm-hmm. is a very long program. It involves a lot of church history, theology, languages,
wow.
Philosophy, and then kind of practical stuff. But
right.
after that first 2 years, I really started to enjoy it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was it still in the history, or were you more into theory and stuff at the end of it?
I really latched on to theology and languages. Was particularly interesting to me. And having a background in English, mm-hmm.
I
I began to be fascinated with the intersection of theology and culture.
Okay.
Theology and literature.
Oh, sure.
And then I moved forward and decided to pursue a degree in English.
Okay.
Beyond that, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you've spent quite a bit of time in school.
A lot of time, yeah, many years. Yeah, more than it should have taken.
Sure.
Yeah. It took me a longer time. It was a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
well, it was for me as well. I mean, I'm still in school, so. But let's talk about your class. I was able to attend your class for the first time last week, and I really found it fascinating. And also the people there were fascinating.
Well, it was an honor to have you there.
Well, I plan
And people were really impressed by your comments and having a background in film, which is something we focus on, which, you know, being kind of, you know, one of the most sort of, or perhaps the most accessible and influential cultural art at this point.
Right.
It was really helpful to have someone with that background there.
Oh, great.
And to have your input.
Well, thank
yeah,
you.
It was very special. Yeah, I hope you can join us again.
I plan to. I absolutely plan to. But tell the viewers what the basic idea behind the class is.
The class is called Embracing Ritual, and as I said, my journey kind of began with sort of the search for self-identity, but to put it simply, embracing ritual, and there's kind of a play on we call it ER for short.
Okay.
And it's kind of an emergency room. It is taught in a church, and anytime you mentioned that you work in a church or you teach in a church, you have to kind of tread softly because people have had so many negative experiences in a church, and there's a lot of baggage that goes along with that. So we try and give people a little bit more of kind of a cultural experience. And so it is sort of because, as I'm sure you've read lately, some of the articles that have emphasized how Americans are becoming exceedingly secular and or less religious and more spiritual, and really have moved away from the church, which is fine. But we want to offer something. Fortunately, there's a church in Pasadena Presbyterian Church, which has graciously given me a venue to hold my class. But we get a variety of very different people from different classes, ethnic backgrounds, creeds. We even have atheists in the class, and yeah, it's a neat mixture.
That is an interesting commentary on our society, because I think that as I was growing up, there was a big movement towards we're not into the church, we're into spirituality.
Yes.
And I don't even see that much of the spirituality anymore among the people that I encounter. It's more of, you know, sort of along the lines of, you know, just finding myself, you know, and it's all internalized, and you know, and which is a little bit disturbing, you know, because I think that has a tendency to lead towards, you know, maybe some selfishness.
Well, that's very perceptive. I think that's, I mean, there's a whole tradition of the kind of internal searching and you know, the importance of knowing oneself. You know, goes back you know, to Socrates or whatever. So, you know, we don't want to disregard the importance of that, but you're absolutely right that that is the prevailing kind of narrative in culture and society outside of formalized religion. I think the thing that is fascinating is that it's also the prevailing narrative within the church as well. Which we are taking a second look at and seeing, you know, what is the, you know, you talk about it kind of being internalized, perhaps selfish, I don't know. You know, I think if there's a greater ethical motive for understanding oneself so you can understand others is certainly, I think people's intentions are definitely good.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is the reason people have become so disenchanted with formalized religion, and we're kind of talking about Christianity here,
Yes.
because it's, you know, it's the one we're most familiar with. You know, we live more or less in a Christian society. I don't mean, I'm not promoting Christianity,
No, we're just talking about,
but we live in a society which has been founded by,
facts.
colonized in a sense by you know, that whole Christian tradition.
Right.
So it's obviously pervasive.
Right.
So, but I think what's interesting is that when people reject formalized religion for being out of touch and hypocritical and judgmental, it's not so much that they seek. I think what they identify is that this sort of consumer-oriented religion that's trying to sell them something.
Okay.
And I think formalized religion in many churches is trying to sell precisely this profound kind of inner sort of angelic spiritual kind of experience, and similar to what I think people are trying to find outside the church, this sort of wholeness and
Right.
But what I think doesn't jibe for them is the fact that the message that is being communicated in churches is contrary to the real message, the underlying message of Scripture, for example.
Right.
And they feel like it's just being sugar-coated.
Yes.
And you know, if they're going to find some kind of profound sort of transcendent or holistic experience, you know, they want to do it in a genuine way.
Right. Right.
So I think religion is making a mistake by diluting essentially the gospel message,
Right.
which is founded more on love, founded on love of something outside yourself, focusing on the other person,
Right.
finding meaning in something that comes sort of from without rather than from within. And it's important to get back to that.
Now, I have noticed that in a lot of cases, the people that I have talked to are actually sort of reversing. Like some people I talk to actually have left and sort of because of the selling of the product, but now have actually come back because they've actually missed the ritual. And as far as I am concerned, it seems to me that organized religion, in some cases, actually is turning around and getting back to the message of the Scripture and getting back to the message of, you know, love thy neighbor and your life's going to be good, you know, and that simple type of message, but within a structured environment that gives people that sense of security because of the rituals that they've grown up with, that they're used to. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm glad you see it, because I don't see it as much, but that's precisely my point of view. You should facilitate my class. You probably do it better than I do. But I mean, that's really kind of what I'm trying to do. Okay. Is kind of a very simplify the religious tradition and kind of a stripped down version. What is religion at its core? I think the idea of ritual, of structure, of being in solidarity for, if even just 50 minutes on a Sunday morning or whatever, among people of profound political and class difference is one of the most human things you can do. In a way, it's kind of getting back to religion, I guess, in kind of an anthropological sense.
Okay.
But with all the dogma and the theology that can get so Byzantine, if we get back to the pure ritual, almost I would say the empty ritual of performance.
Okay.
You know, and again, that's why I'm interested in art and film and kind of the performative aspect of it. There's something very beneficial and transformative that can happen in participating in that.
Right. I agree, and I also think that that in some cases you don't actually even have to participate in it. In the fact, like many Catholics proudly state they're Catholic and don't go to church, you know.
Yes.
But yet they still are. They still, that's how they define themselves, you know, and they want to be associated with that group.
Yes, and I'm Protestant and I'm Presbyterian, which for many decades I didn't like that. It wasn't cool. There's something very sterile about the Reformed tradition, but I'm interested in precisely what you're saying with a little bit different take on that, and that is embracing religion in as part of our tradition, and as if you're Catholic, embracing it contrary to the fact that you may not buy into all the kind of theology that goes along with it, but you can still participate in the ritual of it. You can recite the creeds.
Yes.
Now this seems very hypocritical, but I think it's hypocritical in the same way that most of us go through life, and in order to survive, we need our rituals. We sit at Starbucks and buy coffee from a corporation that we know is, or we buy computers from Apple that builds their devices in China under questionable work environment. Religion in the same way, we need to allow people to come in and participate and not require them to have some sort of profound internal conviction in order to participate.
Right.
You have to believe, or you have to be somehow purified before you come up and partake in communion or
I've recently just been in speaking with a young woman that is part of one of these mega churches, and it was like, it was almost like she was, and I hate to say it, but it's just almost like she was brainwashed. I mean, it was just all about the church and passing the message on and saving people, you know, and it was just, and I thought to myself, is there something that I'm missing? Because I don't feel the obvious conviction that this girl feels, because I didn't. I don't feel that way. In fact, there is no way that her and I could have had a relationship, because we were on such different different levels. I consider myself a cafeteria Catholic, and I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, but it's prevalent in the Catholic Church in the fact that we go and we take what we want, and then we leave the rest. And I think that the Catholic Church has become fairly, at least I haven't run into any issues with it, you know. And so I think that might be what you're talking about, is being almost, your word was hypocritical, but it's like we're reversing the hypocrisy of the church so that we can.
Well, there's something very at the core. Look, my class, or the class I help facilitate, again, you know, three of the most common criticisms of religion is that it's out of touch, hypocritical, and judgmental. If there's anything we do, it gets people more in touch with culture, probably more than they ever wanted. I mean, we focus more on, you know, classical films, so-called secular film and poetry and contemporary short story, because we, and sort of seeing theological themes, or, you know, like grace or love through these artistic mediums.
And you're talking about secular mediums.
Yeah, because once you are, you know, there's plenty to be gained by all kinds of art, you know, and I'm not sure that art, once it's fueled by a certain religious dogma, is I mean, already it's carrying a certain baggage. But what you're saying about the example of these kind of mega churches, and what I mean, some of them are very successful or have been. I'm not sure if we're coming to kind of the end of that sort of era, but they do kind of, they give people what they want. They give them this kind of, you know, feel good, warm, fuzzy kind of experience. And the problem I've seen a number of people who have had kind of these born again experiences in a church.
Yes.
But I'm always concerned when that happens, especially if it's someone who has come from a deep place of brokenness or despair or trauma in their life, because suddenly they found the answer.
Right.
But how long is the honeymoon going to last? Because life goes on, and life is not perfect, and the good suffer and the evil prosper.
And you can't stay on that pink cloud forever.
So that's why I want people to, we try and focus on our common experience in the world as being unfair. I mean, we live in a world where, you know, there's profound evil, where many of us struggle with, you know, profound internal kind of struggles and differences. Absolutely. And that's where we can find, now theologians might call it sin, but other people, you know, psychologists, psychoanalysts might call it trauma, or alienation,
or human nature.
Yeah, or human duplicity, the human condition.
The human condition,
so,
absolutely.
You know, that's something we all can relate on. I don't care where you come from, whether you are a so-called believer or an atheist or an agnostic. That's common ground in which we can experience solidarity.
Right.
So there's a certain guilt. Psychologists might call it a kind of a super ego guilt. When you go to some of these churches where everybody's happy, you know, and it's almost, if you're not happy, there's something wrong with you. And
that is exactly how I felt, and it was disconcerting. It was uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable, because there was almost this unspoken judgment that you're not as happy as we are, so maybe you really haven't accepted Christ in your life. And it's like, I don't think I need you telling me, you know, where I'm at, in my life. And
Yes.
and I think that you're absolutely right. I think that they pick up a lot of broken people and give them some structure and some meaning and some joy. But again, you're right. How long does that honeymoon last? And when it's over, where do those people turn? What becomes of them? And it's something of concern.
It is, and the well, and see, one thing, there is this deep tradition among kind of Western religions of I see it a lot among Judaism, and there's such a deep and rich tradition within Judaism that even people who no longer hold to the dogmas and the doctrines of Judaism will continue to participate in the community and go to the synagogue, and there's something redemptive in that in and of itself. And you see that in you pointed it out in Catholicism as well. I'm Protestant, and I'm assuming the mega church you went to was probably kind of a Protestant church,
right,
and Bible church. I want to see more of that in the Protestant church as well. That, look, this is part of my tradition,
right,
and I can participate in it for purely that purpose. Now, what you're saying about this imposition that it puts on you, that a certain kind of guilt, I think that's fascinating. And the way that we can find that intersection between theology and culture is that we have similar kind of and a similar experience in what I would call the culture industry. That if you're not cultured, if you're not well read, or if you don't like the proper artists, if you're not into the Belle Epoque, or if you don't like Picasso, something's wrong with you. Film in particular, we look at film, we're fascinated with film, but film has a particular, there's something about it, and you could probably tell me more about this, in which we talked about how it's the most accessible and prolific kind of art around it. But also, it not only it's not simply accessible in the sense of that we are able to identify with it. Film, in a sense, with the barrage of stimuli, visual, auditory, the speed at which we're bombarded with that, it almost tells us what to feel and what to desire. I would say, in a kind of ironic way, in a similar way that a megachurch might do. So, so you can see how a look at film and the profound sort of experience we have in that can lead into the discussion of God and of art, and you could talk about the law of what we're supposed to do, are interrelated.
Well, Eric, I hate to do this. It's incredibly. This is such a great conversation. We have hardly even touched the surface, but we're going to have to cut it off for today, and we will pick it up again. But do you want people to know about is there something you would like to, is a phone number or something that they can reach you at to learn more about this class, or is there a website or anything like that, an email, or should we talk about that the next time we meet?
The class meets Sunday mornings at Pasadena Presbyterian Church. It's on the corner of Colorado Boulevard and Madison in Pasadena on the north side. It's just up from Vroman's and the Lemley in the theater district. It meets about 11:30 in the morning in the library upstairs. Please come. If this sounds interesting to you, we'd love to have you and have your input.
All right, that's great. And Eric, I would love it if at some point in the near future you could come back and we could pick up where we've left off today.
Love to.
Okay,
Great.
that's
Thanks
great.
for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. It's
Yeah,
been a
appreciate
wonderful.
it.
And we want to thank you for joining us today for a really stimulating talk with Eric. And we will have him back very soon. So thank you very much for joining us on Focus on Arts, and we will see you next time. Take care.